Have you ever hesitated to share your work online because you're afraid of what people might say? Or maybe you're already put a few paintings out there and someone left a mean comment that made you question yourself, your skills, or even whether you should keep going. I want you to know you're not alone, and this video is for you. My name is Anna. I'm a professional illustrator from Canada. Over the years, I worked with big brands like Simon & Schuster and Starbucks. I also teach watercolor here on YouTube. I'm a top teacher on Skillshare, and yes, despite all that, I get my fair share of negativity online on a regular basis. So today I want to have a very real heart-to-heart conversation with you all about how to deal with cutting or even downright cruel online comments, especially as an artist. Whether you're just starting your watercolor journey, cautiously beginning to share your work on Instagram, or even thinking of starting your own YouTube channel, I think this video will give you the encouragement, clarity, and some real strategies to move forward. To keep things cozy, I'll be painting a little Scottish Highland cow in my sketchbook as we talk. A peaceful break from the more complex work I've been doing recently, like my latest $350 Canadian coin featuring King Charles and 5 royal effigies. You can find this one on the Royal Canadian Mint website. I also just released a very intricate yellow rose tutorial for my Patreon subscribers. So today's watercolor is a way to unwind, and I'll be posting the outline and real-time recording of this little cow on Patreon later this month. So let's talk honestly about sharing our creativity online and how to protect your art and your heart in a very noisy online world. And I'm going to start by naming what these comments can actually look like, because they vary and some are sneakier than others based on my experience and what I've observed on some of my favorite art channels. They can include things like very mild suggestions. For example, you should try a different type of watercolor paper, or this pigment would work better. And I actually find these helpful, and I'm always curious about what other people recommend based on their experience, especially when it comes to niche pigments and subjects. Then sometimes you hear unsolicited critiques like your proportions are totally off, or in my case, your flowers are okay, but your portraits are really mediocre. You should be embarrassed to post them. Then you might hear comments pretending to be helpful, like this might be good if you actually knew what you were doing. Or like this one I get a lot, it usually goes like this: real artists don't use fugitive colors, and since you're using fugitive opera pink, no one should listen to your advice. It's like, okay, I said it a million times, I scan my work for commercial purposes and digital scans don't fade, so why not use this lovely pink color that looks amazing? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's not forget that sometimes they're straight up insults. Things like, this looks awful and you shouldn't even post this. Or my favorite comment that someone left me that basically said, you paint meaningless things, these flowers have no value and you're wasting your talent. I don't know what can be more meaningful than celebrating and meditating on the beauty of nature, but I digress. Now, here's a really nasty thing that happens sometimes. If you dare to post your face, people might actually attack your appearance or voice. And I get this a lot. Comments like, your voice is annoying, your voice is disgusting, I hate your accent, things of that nature. I usually just block them. And when I first started sharing my work publicly, I received many comments like these. Some about my art, others about how I looked or sounded. These days, the comments are a little different, maybe less frequent, but they're still there. And guess what? For someone who's sharing their work online, be it watercolor or any other creative product, they will never fully go away. Because no matter how skilled you are, someone somewhere will always have something negative to say. It's not a reflection of your worth, and I want to be very clear about that. It's just the reality of sharing a part of yourself online. The problem is, if you are not grounded in your own self-worth and understanding of why these things are so prevalent, if you're not focused on your goals, it's really easy to ignore all the support and encouragement we get, and even one negative comment can ruin your day. I want to acknowledge that overall, the online art community is very supportive, and I've been incredibly lucky to have particularly warm and encouraging subscribers. So any examples I bring up here are definitely not reflective of my overall experience on YouTube or any other platform. But I did encounter a fair bit, especially in the beginning, and as part of what I do here, sharing my art journey, sharing my tips and techniques, I want to also give you some concrete tips that help me deal with online criticism as it relates to what we all love, which is art. In order to deal with it effectively, we first need to understand why sometimes people do this, why they feel compelled to criticize creativity, what should be one of the most joyful, celebrated human experiences. Let's be honest, art is vulnerable. You're showing something personal, something you made, and the internet is a wild and anonymous place. There are a few reasons people might feel the need to leave hurtful comments. First of all, maybe they're having a bad day and you're their outlet. That's just the reality. They might feel powerless, and criticizing others gives them a sense of control. That's also a fact. They might feel jealous or insecure. Or maybe they genuinely think they're helping, but completely lack the empathy or tact to do it kindly. We can't control these people. What we can control is our reaction and our boundaries. As artists, we have to learn to distinguish between what I like to call the good, the bad, and the ugly in online feedback. So the good would be constructive feedback that we can learn from. For example, early on in my YouTube journey, my audio wasn't very good, and after hearing many people comment on this aspect, I invested in better microphone. That's fine. That's actually very, very helpful. The bad would be things like unsolicited or poorly delivered critique. And usually I give people the benefit of the doubt and assume good intentions, even if the tone is a bit off-putting. But I don't take it too seriously, especially if it's completely out of context. In other words, I try to put the criticism in the context of what I know about my own art journey and my goals. And I recommend you do the same. For example, if someone's criticizing your color choices, but these colors are really part of your style, you don't need to pay attention to any criticism or negativity that you hear. For example, there are a million different pigments that you can use to paint this specific brown cow. And I'm actually testing a bunch, from earthy burnt sienna and ochre to vibrant staining quinacridone oranges. I know more or less which ones I like the most, but this is an experimental piece aimed at testing different color combinations, and what I'm seeing here is burnt sienna, which is easily lifted off the page, is really not suitable for heavy layering that I enjoy, but someone else might really like it, so it's all part of the discovery process. Finally, the ugly, the rude, toxic, or even personal attacks that show up from time to time. These comments can sting the most, especially if you're already feeling vulnerable about putting your art out there. But I want you to hear this clearly. These comments are not about you. They're mostly a reflection of the person writing them, what they're going through, what they might be projecting, and what insecurities they're wrestling with. It has nothing to do with your worth as a person or an artist. Once you know what you're looking at, it's easier to know what to let in and what to let go of. This is the heart of it. How do you deal with negativity without letting it derail your progress or hurt your confidence? Here's what helped me. First of all, ignore anything that isn't helpful. If it's not constructive, if it's not contributing to your progress or the joy you feel when painting or drawing, it is not worth your energy. Secondly, use the block and mute buttons freely. I wish I knew this when I first started my YouTube channel. There's a reason these block features exist, and using them doesn't make you too sensitive, quote unquote. It makes you smart. Thirdly, don't take every comment personally. You're not creating for everyone, you're creating for yourself and for your people, the ones who get it. And you want to find constructive nuggets and take action if needed. So as I mentioned early on in my YouTube journey, I received comments about poor audio, and that was fair. I upgraded my equipment. But others, like frequent jabs about my accent, I've learned to laugh it off. English isn't my first or even second language. It's not something I can change, and frankly, I'm proud of it. And finally, remind yourself of your progress and the fact that everyone is on a journey when it comes to art. If you're just starting to learn a medium like watercolor, don't expect it to be perfect, but share what you've learned and what worked for you. Compare your work to your own work from a year ago or 2 years ago, and know that you will get better with every stroke. So for example, I know that this little Scottish cow won't be perfect, and that's totally okay. It's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be practice, joyful, exploratory, imperfect practice. Anytime I paint something that's not an intricate flower composition like this cow, or God forbid a portrait, I may get comments about how I suck and should be embarrassed, and someone said my portraits are mediocre. That's okay. Obviously I've painted a million flowers in my life. In fact, I do this for a living. I specialize in creating botanical and decorative silver and gold dollar coins from my country, Canada. I spent thousands of hours perfecting that specific type of art, and I'm quite good at it. But I've only painted a handful of portraits and landscapes, and maybe 100 animals in my entire life. So I have a long way to go before I get really, really good at it. But I also enjoy it, and I know a thing or two about color theory. I wrote a book about watercolors with a specific focus on watercolor pigment properties, and I will continue perfecting my work in areas other than flowers, slowly, over time, just like everybody else. In other words, I'm no different than any beginner out there when it comes to certain subjects, and I'm okay with that. Discouraging comments don't really bother me anymore, at least not as much as they used to years ago, because I know that with time, I'll get where I want to be, and so will you. So ignore them. Most of the time, it's not a productive use of your time to respond. So the takeaway is to never let someone else's opinion make you shrink. Don't let it stop you from painting or drawing or sharing if you feel like sharing, or growing. Now, let's zoom out for a minute. We all know that being an artist today is very different from what it was 50 or even 10 years ago. Back then, you could build a quiet studio practice, share work with local galleries, maybe have an agent if you're an illustrator like me, keep things very private, and still build a sustainable living. These days, if you want to sell your work or even just find a community, you kind of need to share online, and that means exposing yourself to the entire world, including people who may never understand what you do. It's vulnerable, it can be very hard, and it's not really talked about enough. Many of us are naturally very sensitive. Some of us are working through imposter syndrome. Some of us are juggling kids, jobs, health issues, or grief. And on top of all that, then trying to post art on Instagram or YouTube. So if you feel overwhelmed, that's totally normal. I've been through all that, and it wasn't easy at times. What's harder though is giving up and realizing years later that you missed your chance and you regret not overcoming your fears. This is why it's so important to stay grounded in your goals, your values, and your joy, and ignore the noise. I'm very much an introvert with anxiety, and I find it particularly difficult to show up online in ways that are loud and expressive. This is why most of the time you see my hands and hear my voice. I don't speak directly to the camera, or at least not very often. And that's a very happy balance that I was able to find. And at the end of the day, I'm so happy with the wonderful community that surrounds me here and on Patreon. I encourage you to set aside the noise, ignore negativity, and experiment with different forms of online presence, whether it's writing about your work, recording the process, sharing your challenges, all in ways that you're comfortable with. And if something bothers you, you have my permission and my blessing to block, delete, and never respond to that comment. Before I wrap up, let me leave you with a few final reminders. You are allowed to be a beginner. Don't let someone rush your growth with rude comments. You don't need to be perfect to be valuable. People want to see you, not just polished masterpieces. People who don't want to see you, ignore them. You're allowed to take breaks, set boundaries, and protect your mental space. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. And also remember that every comment says more about the person writing it than about you. Most importantly, you're not alone in this. So here's my little Scottish cow. Simple, sweet, and far from perfect, but painting this brought me so much joy. I painted today to relax, and also because I really want to visit Scotland someday. Instead, I just came back from Costa Rica and I brought some really gorgeous tropical reference photos, so stay tuned because next week I will be sharing a very vibrant tropical tutorial inspired by that trip. To all of you watching, whether you're painting quietly at home, thinking about posting your first piece, or maybe already navigating the chaos of online critique, I see you, I support you, keep going. If you know someone who might benefit from hearing these thoughts, do share this video. It's the best way to support my channel outside of Patreon. Block the trolls, paint what brings you joy, and don't let the fear of something inconsequential stop you from being creative.